Outgoing head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci, is delivering his last round of interviews before he steps down from his post this month. Here's a bit from the most recent interview.
Could we have been less restrictive about schools and less restrictive about closing down the economy and focused, if not from the very start, earlier on the elderly?
You know, in the absence of vaccination, that would have been very difficult to do. But right now that you have the ability to vaccinate people, you can actually clearly be much more liberal and open in what we're doing, which is where we are really right now. But in the very beginning, when essentially everyone was at risk of infection, you can pass it on to someone else inadvertently, innocently, and have that person suffer a dire consequence. So when you're dealing in the beginning, it was like a tsunami that you needed to shut off quickly and then open up as quickly as you possibly can.
CNN's Chris Wallace pressed Fauci further about the inflammatory "I am the science" remarks he made back in 2021 and criticism that followed. Take a listen.
Your critics accuse you of hubris.
Right.
They say that you express a certainty and a disregard for the views of others. Yeah. Can you understand when you say I represent science?
Sure, I can understand how that could have been taken out of context, and I probably had to do it all over again, would have changed the wording a little bit of that. What I was trying to say, Chris, is that what I was doing was saying, here are the data of why vaccines are safe and effective, so we should be getting people vaccinated. So when you're criticizing me, you're actually criticizing the scientific facts, because I'm just the vocal and visible vehicle of the scientific facts. That's what I meant when I was saying you're criticizing science.
Fauci, who will be 82 on Christmas Eve, already signaled that while he is stepping away from the government, he does not plan on retiring. I don't think his greater elaboration on the "I am the science" comment there is really satisfactory for me or for anyone who thought it was critical or was critical of it the first time, because he is not just the mouthpiece for the science. He has his own views and his own agenda. And also science fact, like science is a process of deliberation and debate, and things we thought that were true early on are no longer true. There's more debate over some things, how effective various different masks are and were at different stages of the pandemic, whether requiring them has this massive benefit. Same is true for vaccines, same is true for other mitigation, or which mitigation efforts really make a lot of a really good intervention. I mean, there was a phase of this pandemic where people were still shamed for just going outside or going to the beach. You were going to die. The Grim Reaper was following you around at the beach. You remember that? Where they were putting padlocks on parks. Which, again, I'm not saying Dr. Fauci personally, put those chains up, but he was an advocate for policies like that. So it's okay to question them. It's not, the science doesn't just say, we know this for certain.
Yeah.
You have to shut up if you think differently.
All he said was, "I am the science," with more words, right there.
Yes.
He said, I am the mouthpiece for the science. I mean, sir, that's not the critique. The critique, to your point, is that there's a diversity of opinion that is out there. Not opinion. There's a diversity of scientific conclusions that are evolving as we learn more, and that no one person ever could adequately funnel all of them, because some of them are contradictory, right? And they are, in fact, evolving, which you would have to admit, because the policies have been evolving, and that's fine. Look, the fundamental problem here was the certainty with which all of this information was delivered. And he was a big part of that. Whether another figurehead in his place would have done the same thing and it was about the position and not the man, fine. Like, I have no personal beef with Anthony Fauci, but it is a little frustrating to hear him still not kind of get the basis of that critique, and to not get more pushback when he basically just said, "I am the science," all of these years later, using 15 words instead of 3.
And if by the science he means, national, federal health officials. I mean, these are the same people that utterly screwed up the early testing, that shut down tests that might have worked for their own tests that didn't work. And then there was tremendous frustration about that from, if not, I think from Fauci. He wasn't particularly vocal about it, but from his deputy, the lady with the scarves. You remember her?
With the scarves?
No, with the bandanas. You remember her? I can't think of her name right now.
Okay.
Scarf lady, Fauci, Dr. Deborah Birx.
Okay.
There's her name. So even if you're like, you don't have to be what I'm saying is you don't have to be a crazy COVID contrarian delusion person, which I guess I put myself in this category, to think that something went wrong with the official scientific response, and also to have serious concerns and serious questions about what the funding of research, how that might have played into, if not this pandemic, a future pandemic. It seems like there is plenty of legitimate skepticism of things Dr. Fauci has been an advocate of within the scientific community, even among people who would have supported exactly as robust a public policy response to this pandemic as Dr. Fauci did, are still saying these experiments have real risks and real downsides that are not being properly weighed, that people like Dr. Fauci are maybe not fully aware even of what's going on. That's what came through to me in that 7-hour deposition I talked about last week, that he doesn't even quite remember every paper that crossed his desk and what he signed off on, even if these were very controversial research choices being made under lightly monitored conditions, both domestically and abroad. Well, that's not anti-science to say that. You can in fact, be pro-science.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. But let me ask you this, Robby. Are you concerned at all that some of the focus on Dr. Fauci, as opposed to the structural issues at play here, are going to be a problem for folks who want to continue this criticism once Fauci goes away?
Yeah. Do
you think that there's been an issue where, because he's been made out to be the bad guy kind of singularly, what's the movement going to do? What are the critics? I think, and I'm not trying to be dismissive here, I think there are substantive criticisms that should be leveraged. But if he's not kind of the lightning rod for this, what's going to come of everything when he's gone? I mean, he's gone.
I think that's going to be a real worry because, frankly, Republicans do not always do a good job of keeping their eyes on the ball. Trump rails against the deep state for the 4 years of his presidency, is furious with intelligence officials for spying on him and supposedly listening to his phone calls and the FISA court, all of that stuff. They didn't do a gosh darn thing, I could use harsher language, to reform that process whatsoever. They did nothing. Republicans, supposedly the new right populist MAGA Republicans who hate the deep state and the national intelligence and have learned how it could be weaponized against Trump, so anyone, they still vote to reauthorize all of those. They vote in lockstep to do it, so it's very frustrating.
There's so much of this that happens that on both sides of the aisle that's nothing more than grievance politics. Yeah. It's why so many conservatives roll their eyes when a liberal says something about helping marginalized groups, because they don't actually believe they want to help those groups. They're just doing grievance politics. Oftentimes that's true. And it's why I think a lot of liberals haven't been able to hear some of the substantive criticisms of how the COVID rollout has happened, because it does feel in some ways like it's bad faith if it's going to go away the second that Fauci is gone or the second there's a Republican in the White House, et cetera. I mean, we saw it with Donald Trump. Even for Donald Trump, Fauci was his friend and then he wasn't. And Trump has been struggling with how to talk about the pandemic because he wanted to claim credit for getting the vaccines out at the same time that the tide has turned against him with his own audience. So what is the core value there? What is the core principle there? Are we going to see conservatives continue to be skeptical of the pharmaceutical industry? Are they going to care that the pharmaceutical industry gives so much money to their candidates and exert influence in that way? Are we going to pretend in the same way we have, some people have, not us, but some people have with Sam Bankman-Fried, that because he was publicly giving to Democrats and privately giving to Republicans, that there isn't a big club with none of us in it, and the criticism is going to vanish the second that your guy is in the big seat?
Yeah, that is an interesting point that's always worth bringing up. That Trump himself substantially does not agree with the hardcore MAGA criticism of all that. He is very supportive of Operation Warp Speed. He's proud of having delivered the vaccines as fast as he did. He said he's gotten vaccinated. He said he's gotten boosted. He's not advocated for vaccine mandates. He said it should absolutely be your choice, but he's said he thinks what the good choice is. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out as he charts his potential course back to the White House. All right, that's it for us for today. Tomorrow on Rising, we'll be back with all our coverage of the big news of the day.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts, and you can catch us on Roku and other streaming services.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.